Have you ever seen one of those propaganda films? There's often a scene, a Hindu girl, absolutely terrified, being forced to eat beef. It's a really powerful image, right? It's designed to lock in a very specific idea about Hinduism. But here's the thing. Is that idea even true? That's really the big question we're digging into here. This idea that all real Hindus are and have always been strictly vegetarian. It's just, part of the popular imagination. But how much of that is based on actual history and scripture versus, say, more modern cultural and political stories?
Okay, let's just start with a number that might actually surprise you. According to the Pew Research Center, a whopping 56%, yep, more than half, of all Hindus identify as non-vegetarian. Right away, that single statistic creates this huge gap between what we think is true and what the reality is. So if most Hindus do eat meat, where did this whole idea of the pure vegetarian Hindu even come from? Well, for that, we've got to go back, way back.
To really get to the bottom of this, we have to look at the foundational scriptures of Hinduism. What do they actually say about eating meat? Now, you might think the answer would be pretty straightforward, but it's anything but. So, on one hand, the Mahabharata gives a really strong argument for vegetarianism. When Yudhishthira asks the wise Bhishma about it, the answer is crystal clear. Don't eat meat, you go to heaven. Eat meat, you go to hell. It's a powerful endorsement of ahimsa, or nonviolence. Case closed, right? Well, not so fast. In the exact same conversation, Bhishma also says that meat that's been consecrated with mantras for a religious ceremony is considered pure and totally okay to eat. So the very same text gives you both sides. It's not a simple ban. It's a really complex set of rules and situations. And this isn't just a one-off thing. Other major texts say similar things. The Vyasa Samhita says Brahmins should eat meat during certain ceremonies. The Manusmriti backs up that idea of consecrated meat being okay. The ancient medical text Charka Samhita actually recommends meat for treating sicknesses. And get this, the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad even suggests a meal with bull's meat for a couple that wants to have a smart, learned child. So the evidence seems pretty clear. Eating meat was a normal and sometimes even prescribed part of ancient life. So that leads to the big question a lot of people have. What about the heroes, the legends? Surely figures like the Pandava brothers or Lord Ram himself, they had to be vegetarians, right? Well, the texts don't really leave us guessing. In the Mahabharata, there's this really incredible scene that comes to Yudhishthira in a dream. A group of deer basically begs him to hunt them less because his brothers have killed so many that their species is actually at risk. And he mentions that they've been living on deer meat for a year and 8 months straight. I mean, think about that. They ate so much meat, they almost wiped out the local deer population. This wasn't some exception, it was their staple food. And it's not just in the Mahabharata. Swami Vivekananda, one of the most respected modern Hindu leaders, pointed to a passage in the original Valmiki Ramayana. In it, Sita makes a vow to the river goddess Ganga, and she promises an offering of meat, rice, and 1,000 jars of wine if they return safely. The very idea of offering meat to a goddess just shows how normal it was in a sacred context. So, if meat was so common in the scriptures and among the epic heroes, what happened? How did we get from that to the modern idea that Hinduism is all about vegetarianism, especially for certain castes? Well, this is where we see a huge turning point in the story. Around the 5th century BCE, 2 major new religions popped up in India, Jainism and Buddhism, and both of them put a huge emphasis on nonviolence, which meant pushing for vegetarianism. As these faiths got more popular, a lot of Brahmins and merchant castes started to adopt vegetarianism themselves. And why? Well, it was a way to reclaim the moral high ground. We're pure because we don't eat meat. And for the wealthy merchants, it was an affordable way to show off their status. And this is where Dr. B.R. Ambedkar offers a really powerful analysis of this whole shift. He argued that food created 2 dividing lines. The first one separated vegetarians from non-vegetarians. But the second line, he said, was much harsher. And it was between those who ate beef and those who didn't. He argued this line was used to socially outcast people and basically create the category of untouchables, because they were often the poorest communities who kept eating beef. So vegetarianism wasn't just a diet, it became a tool for social hierarchy. Okay, so how do these ancient texts, these big historical shifts, and these deep social divisions actually play out today? Let's look at the numbers, because honestly, they tell a pretty fascinating story about modern India.
So if we look at that Pew Research data, you can literally see the legacy of this history. While only 8% of Jains are non-vegetarian, which makes perfect sense given their religion's focus, a clear majority, 56% of Hindus, are not. This just reinforces that historical shift we talked about. Vegetarianism became a core part of Jainism, but for most Hindus, it remained more of a choice or a cultural practice. And today's data really seems to back up Dr. Ambedkar's point. Survey after survey shows that non-vegetarianism is way more common among marginalized communities, those identified as scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and other backward classes, often over 60%. But in the general category, it's lower, down at 47%. That dividing line he talked about, you can still see its shadow in the data today. And here's another number that just completely shatters the stereotype. A major survey found that 45% of Brahmins, the caste most associated with pure vegetarianism, are non-vegetarians. Just let that sink in for a second. Nearly half of the community that's often held up as the ideal for this practice eats meat. And then, of course, geography plays a huge role. I mean, just look at the difference here. In landlocked northern states like Rajasthan and Haryana, where farming is king, vegetarianism is super high. But then you go to coastal states like West Bengal and Kerala, where fish is on every menu and almost nobody is vegetarian. It just goes to show your diet is often shaped more by what's around you than by one single religious rule. And, well, this brings us to politics, where things get even more complicated. In North India, the BJP often uses the beef issue to energize voters, framing it as a sacred cause. But then you look at states like Kerala or in the Northeast, where a lot of people, including Hindus, eat beef. And there, their own candidates have promised to make sure there's good quality beef, and their manifestos just happen to leave out any mention of a beef ban. It's such a clear example of how food gets used as a political tool, adapted for whoever's listening. So what do we make of all this? The scriptures point in different directions, history shows this massive shift, and the data today reveals these deep divides by caste, geography, and even politics. Yeah, it's far from a simple picture. So let's just recap what we've learned. What you eat as a Hindu isn't decided by some single ancient rule. It's a product of everything: contradictory scriptures, a historical reaction to other religions, a marker of your caste and economic status, and just the simple reality of where you live. Now, let's be absolutely clear about something. Choosing to be a vegetarian is a powerful and totally valid personal choice. If you do it for ethical reasons like animal welfare, for the environment, or just for your health, those are all fantastic reasons. That is a philosophy of compassion that is absolutely worth celebrating. The crucial point is this: the problem isn't vegetarianism itself. The problem starts when that diet is used as a weapon, when it's used to claim you're morally better than someone else, to prop up ancient and unjust caste systems, and to create division, both socially and politically. So this brings us to the final question, one we should all probably think about. After looking at the history, the politics, and all the data, we have to ask ourselves, is what's on our plate really just a personal choice? Or is it also a reflection of our cultural inheritance, our social position, and yeah, sometimes even a political statement? The answer, as we've seen, is way more complex than we might think.